Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Diaries of a 20-something. I'm Paige Marquez, your host, and today we're going to be talking about all things imposter syndrome and just embracing new change in your life and everything that goes with it. This is definitely going to be very relevant, especially if you are in the post-grad time of your life, that whole transitional period. So definitely stay tuned. Just to start off, I want to talk about how relevant this is in the post-grad scheme of things because you're in college, you're doing everything you're supposed to be doing, and then you graduate and you're no longer, for the first time in your life, a student anymore. It's definitely like a weird thing. I know that was like my biggest thing leaving college. I was like, wow, like my entire life I've been a student in some capacity. Like my whole life has been planned, but now everything is fully on me and up to me. And while it is very inspiring to think about it that way, that you fully dictate and control everything that's going to happen in your life, it's also really overwhelming and a little bit scary just because of how wide the scope is. I mean, you could literally do whatever you want with your life and nobody can stop you. You're just a real adult. You graduate college and you're immediately in a different mindset. Either you are looking for a job and struggling with finding a job and not working, or you're working and you're struggling with working. I feel like there is no in between. Regardless if you love your job or not, there are going to be challenges with it. And there's going to be moments where you're like, what am I doing? What has gotten me to this point? Your whole mindset is changing, and it's not really changing in a way where it's voluntary. It's a forced mindset change. And I think there's a lot of good things to it, but there's also a lot of negative things to it, including imposter syndrome and just struggling with change. And going back to what I said about how for the first time in your life, everything is fully up to you and you are fully in control of creating the life that you want to live. Once you start doing that, it's hard not to feel undeserving of it and unqualified for what you're doing, but it's totally normal. And that is what I really want to emphasize throughout this entire episode is it is completely normal to feel unqualified and undeserving of what you have brought into your life and created for yourself. The first time I experienced imposter syndrome was actually when I got into the University of Florida. I didn't have very impressive stats coming out of high school, and I applied to so many schools. I really wanted to go to a big football school. Obviously, those ones are generally more competitive. And I got denied from majority of the schools that I applied for, including ones that were not ranked nearly as high as UF. And somehow I got into UF. And for the longest time, I literally fully believed, and honestly, a part of me still does, that they accepted me on accident and they just couldn't take it back. But that's okay. Got the degree anyway. I just fully believed that I was a fraud for the longest time. I was like, I'm not supposed to be here. And then now I'm experiencing imposter syndrome for the second time. If you don't already know, I recently just uprooted my entire life and everything I've ever known to move to a new state/city. What had happened was I got a job right outside of New York City, and you know me, you know I've always wanted to live in New York City or just in the surrounding areas. I've always just been very infatuated by it, and suburbs just aren't for me. And I think if you're in your 20s, you should live in a city. I think it's a great time to live in a city. You're single, you're working, you're finding yourself, you're figuring out what you like, what you don't like. It's okay to have a little bit of fun and move to a fun place, especially like from the aspect of opportunities and stuff like that. Opportunities are limitless in a place like that. So that is why. But I just got a really cool job and I'm really enjoying it. I've worked twice so far and I love it. I literally cannot believe I'm saying I love my job. I've never had a job that I loved like this, and I wasn't expecting to love it, but I do. And it just so happens that this job is in Hoboken, New Jersey, which is a place I have wanted to live for a long time. It's right outside New York City. And I am so lucky that I get to spend mostly every day there until I find a place, at least. So imposter syndrome is in full effect at the moment. I cannot believe that this is my life. I'm so happy, but there's also such an aspect to it where I'm like, what am I doing? I'm unqualified for this. How did this happen to me? I just feel almost undeserving of it and in disbelief that this is my life. But before I get into it super deeply, I do want to go over what imposter syndrome actually is from a Google standpoint. So I looked up a specific definition for you guys because I didn't want to get it wrong. According to Google, imposter syndrome is a psychological pattern where individuals doubt their accomplishments and have a persistent fear of being exposed as a fraud, despite evidence of their competence and success. People with imposter syndrome often attribute their achievements to luck or external factors rather than their own abilities, and they may feel like they don't deserve their success or that they are deceiving others into believing that they are more capable than they are. But imposter syndrome can affect like literally everybody. But I think it is way more common in times of your life where it's a transitional period. So obviously post grad is a big one. I think another big one would be getting into college, maybe retirement, even promotions. But I think this time, your early 20s is a really big one. So that is why I wanted to talk about it. In the context of the post-grad part of your life, I think imposter syndrome can be completely relevant due to many factors like the transition into adult life and high expectations. I know for me, I have really high expectations for myself. I always have. I heard that that's like, I've always had very high expectations for myself. I just really want to overperform and do the best that I can. I just have a lot of goals, and I feel that if I'm not doing the above and beyond constantly, I'm not going to get there. But I think that's normal. This is another reason why the job search was so mentally draining for me, because rejection, I think I was always fine with it until the job force. I never really experienced rejection that many times and that consistently in my life. So now I have a fear of rejection in all parts of my life that has become evident over the last week or so. But there's also other factors like competition. Like when you're competing for jobs and everybody is just as qualified as you start thinking that you're not doing enough or you didn't do enough in college. That was like my big thing too. I remember in another episode I talked about like in college, do everything you can, because I did a lot in college, and when I graduated, I still feel like it wasn't enough purely because I wasn't getting a job. Another aspect that goes into it, I think this might be just for me, but it's more of like a feeling. But once you get a job that you feel a little underqualified for, it can really kind of mess you up because you're constantly doubting yourself. And then God forbid you make one teeny little mistake at your job. It's like, oh my God, I suck. Even if you did like 10 great things. But like, it's really important to acknowledge that it's very normal in this time of our life. And a lot of people are going through this. I think when I was researching imposter syndrome, I think I saw a study that was like 70% of people experience imposter syndrome at some point in their lives. And that's like a really big number. So just know that you're not alone in it. And hopefully that will help you gain some clarity and comfort. It's also like reframing how you think about yourself. Like instead of thinking emotionally, think logically. Focus on your self-growth. Focus on like what you've done and what you're achieving rather than how you feel about what you've done and how you're achieving. Because one thing I've noticed in this time in my life, you cannot trust your feelings. And I'm going to get into that a little bit later in this episode, but you literally cannot trust it. Just think logically, think, oh, I got a job and I'm taking it. I got the job, which means I'm qualified, which means they want me for my skills. But it's also really important to like celebrate the small achievements that you make. Don't rely too much on the big picture and just kind of be like, okay, I'm doing well. Focus on the little things. Like for example, yesterday was the first time I commuted via train and didn't stress myself out or miss a train once. It was a very smooth commuting day yesterday, which I was really proud of myself for. Like, it's just like little things like that. Don't focus on the big picture. Just be like, I'm so happy with myself for these little things. And I'm sorry about the lighting. I don't know where the lighting just went. Like, sometimes I feel stupid for celebrating the super small victories, but it's really needed. I mean, you have to like acknowledge the fact that you're doing something right and acknowledge the fact that you're succeeding, even if it is the tiniest little thing. But it's also like about change, like embracing change. Like, change is an inevitable part of life, and you can either choose to be scared of it or embrace it. And I think it's really important to just say, screw it, and just be happy with it. I mean, obviously, I'd be lying if I said that moving up here wasn't somewhat horrifying for me. I mean, yes, I was super excited, but every single time I had a negative thought about it, I was just like, shut up, and just like ignored it. And I moved and it felt great. And I feel great. I feel very confident in my decision. I feel good about my decision. I don't regret it in any way, but I did have doubts about it. I just didn't vocalize them to anybody. There are fears that go along with change, you know, like fear of failure and like fear of the unknown, fear of losing control. I mean, I think for me, the biggest one was fear of the unknown. I think that is probably the most common one, you know, moving up here and being like, oh my God, like, what's going to happen? Like, what if I lose my job? It's like so different once you get older and you have a job rather than having a job like in college or in high school or whatever, because it's like, oh, if I get fired, like no one's going to go hungry. You know what I mean? But like, it's different now because I'm an adult and I rely on my career for everything. So I do have like this new fear of getting fired, and like specifically for that reason, because like it matters so much more now. Jobs never really mattered before. They were more just like, oh, like quick shopping money, like extra money, whatever. But no, like it matters now because I genuinely am going to have to start paying rent pretty soon. So that's another thing with embracing change in like a new time of your life. I mean, this is all about that right now. But, like, the amount of times that I'm like asking myself and going through these like what if scenarios is actually insane. Like, I just need to like shut up and just be like, okay, whatever happens, happens, and I'll deal with it as they come. But like, you cannot stress yourself out with hypothetical situations. And I know I sound like a hypocrite saying that because I do that, but it's really not beneficial. And I've been learning that. I literally just did it. What if I get fired? Fact is, I'm probably not going to get fired. I haven't done anything to get fired. I'm not going to do anything to intentionally get fired. So I probably won't get fired. And I hate to call anybody out here, but the hardest part for me about embracing this change and moving forward confidently with this change was actually my dad. He watches all my episodes, so I'm going to frame this very carefully. I love you, Dad, but all of that guilt tripping is not beneficial nor nice, especially when you're dealing with like embracing change and like imposter syndrome. Having somebody like guilt trip you and try and make you feel like you're doing the wrong thing and that you're like abandoning them, like while you're dealing with all these extra pressures that you're putting on yourself, is just so horrible. And I don't know, for me, the more that my dad guilt tripped me about it, the more I was like, I need to go. I mean, it was a new opportunity for me. It was very exciting for me, and it was just not really helping that he was making me feel that way. So, love you, Dad. That wasn't really cool, TBH. But yeah, I struggled with that a lot and just like feeling guilty for like doing something for myself. And eventually I was just like, screw it. I've always wanted something like this. I've always wanted an opportunity like this, and I'm taking it and I'm going. Because I started thinking about it. If I turned down the job and stayed in Florida, I would have never forgiven myself. Like, that would have been something that I would carry for the rest of my life. And that would not be something that I would be able to move past. I would always wonder the what if. Again, with the what if scenarios, I would always wonder like what future opportunities I would miss out on if I didn't take this one. So yeah, I took it anyway. It's just all about like changing your mindset and seeing change as an opportunity and not a threat, and focusing on the potential for growth rather than focusing on the potential of, oh my God, like I'm going to screw up, and like the fear of the unknown and like whatever. Like I said before, I was having doubts, but I just never vocalized them because I didn't want to make them real. You know, as soon as I say something out loud, it's like, okay, now it's like real. Because I also didn't want, like with my dad, you know, guilt tripping me and stuff, I was just like, this is not the time to like show any kind of lack of confidence in what I want to do right now. Like, this is just not the time to be unconfident about my decision making. But yeah, it's about like changing your mindset, you know, like focus on like the small things, like the small goals rather than like the big picture. Like, don't think in your head like, oh my God, like I'm moving to like a whole new city and like that's like crazy. Think more like, okay, I got a job, first day of work is this day. Like, break it down into like little parts rather than one big huge thing, because then you're just going to overwhelm yourself. Instead of being scared of the unknown, like embrace the unknown, be happy with the unknown, be inspired by the unknown. And maybe a little bit of delusion is necessary for this, but it worked for me. Just maintain a positive attitude and like surround yourself with people that actually support your decision and like that like really want you to succeed, and like surround yourself with people that make you feel good. You know what I mean? And like, I'm not saying my dad is not happy for me. Like, he's happy for me. He just isn't happy that I moved, you know? So that's the tea. So if you can't tell already, imposter syndrome and change are deeply, deeply intertwined. I feel like they kind of bounce off of each other constantly. When you're faced with a change, whether it be a new job or a big move or whatever, imposter syndrome can really amplify the fear of the unknown and the fear of the entire change itself when you're going through a new transition. But I genuinely do believe at the same time, and this may be like crazy to say, but yes, imposter syndrome is horrible. But at the same time, I feel like embracing change can kind of be the key to getting over imposter syndrome. Because when you really start to embrace change and not fear change, and when your whole mindset changes about that, I think you will stop doubting your abilities. This whole episode is the entire thing of like what I've been dealing with recently, and I've kind of been going through it alone. I haven't really talked to anybody about it. I'm just realizing I haven't like voiced this to anybody in my life. Like, it's okay for change to be scary, but don't let it control your life. And don't turn down an opportunity because you're scared. Don't turn down an opportunity because you're doubting yourself or you feel unqualified or like whatever the case may be. It's just like, this is your life. If you get a good opportunity, take it, because if you don't, you will never forgive yourself. Like, by facing change and seeing it as something for growth and new opportunities, I feel like you can dismantle the beliefs that go behind imposter syndrome. They bounce off of each other in a negative way, but I think they can also be used to fix each other and fix the mindset that comes with them. All in all, I feel like it's really important to remember that if you are going through a big change and you are faced with imposter syndrome and just the difficulties that come with imposter syndrome and like the mindset, just know that you are not alone. It's all about changing your mindset and focusing on the good rather than the unknown and the scary. Being post-grad is such a complex and weird time in our lives, and unless we actually sit down and talk about it, it's just going to keep being ignored. Nobody warned me about this in college. Nobody ever sat me down in college and was like, post-grad is horrifying, post-grad is scary, post-grad sucks. Nobody told me about this. I just feel like this is something I should have known going into this. Like, all of these common things that keep happening to me, because once I talk about them, people are like, oh yeah, for sure. But why did nobody warn me about this? You've always had girlfriends that were older than me, and like, why did nobody tell me this? But yeah, if you're watching this and you've ever dealt with anything similar, or if you're going through something similar right now, or if you have any advice for others who may be dealing with the same thing right now, feel free to leave a comment down below. Next week, we're going to be talking all about long distance friendships, because that has been affecting me as well recently, now that I've moved up here and had long distance friends in New Jersey and New York. And I had close friends, like my best friends in Florida. And now it's like my long distance friends in New Jersey and New York have become my close friends, and my close friends from Florida have become my long distance friends. So like, that's been kind of weird. So I want to do an episode on that. Like, share, and subscribe. And this was Diaries of a 20-something, episode 12. And I will see you guys next Friday.